Well, in the Pious Reflections podcast, we are going to be talking to She Van Fleet in just a minute. Her book is Mao's America, A Survivor's Warning. You're going to want to check it out, but I wanted to talk about how this came about very briefly because I told all of you I was going to stop podcasting, and now I'm here with an interview with She Van Fleet, which is pretty cool how it happened. Bottom line is that I had packed everything up and said, all right, we're going to shut this sucker down, and we're going to be done. Announced it on my Substack and said we were over and that we were going to just write and do a little bit of audio here and there. But the bottom line is that prior to that decision in April, I had messaged She Van Fleet about doing an interview on Christianity and communism, which is what you're about to watch. And I, for technical reasons, I never heard from her because her direct messaging on Twitter was messed up, and so she missed it. And so she reached back out and just last month, a couple weeks ago, and said she was interested in coming on the podcast. So the way that happened was a little bit extraordinary. I had decided that I wasn't going to do the podcast, as I mentioned, and we had boxed everything up, ready to sell. And one night I just felt I needed to really pray about this pretty heavily. I wasn't feeling good about the decision. We have this beautiful downstairs that has just turned out perfect for podcasting. And so I prayed about it pretty hard and just asking God to give us some guidance on whether or not we were supposed to shut down. And the next morning I was getting ready for Mass because I was doing daily Mass that week. And it was about 5:30 in the morning, and I checked my messages on Twitter and saw that she had responded to me and said she wanted to do the interview. And I immediately woke up my wife, Lindsay, and said, Lindsay, you're not going to believe this. And it was 5:30 in the morning, so she wasn't very happy about that. But anyway, I had a great time talking to her and really enjoyed it, and I hope that you're encouraged by it as well. And after the interview, I decided to sit down and just kind of reflect on how this whole thing happened, how we went from nothing in this room a couple weeks ago to suddenly having it all set back up again. And I realized that when I went back and checked the timestamp, I said to myself, when did she actually message me? Did she message me in the morning or did she message me at night the night before? And I went and checked the timestamp, and sure enough, her timestamp was at the time that I would have been praying and asking God for guidance. So, I don't know if this is a divine blip or what, but God got me back on the mic, and he used She Van Fleet to do it. And so I hope that you enjoy the interview and have a little bit of grace for me as I dust off the rust of getting in front of the microphone. Anyway, this is an interview with She Van Fleet, Mao's America, a survivor from communism, and it's about Christianity is the antidote to the communism we are experiencing today. So I hope you enjoy. God bless. We'll get started here. All right, we're recording now. So thanks for jumping onto the Pious Reflections podcast. For those that don't know, she wrote the Mao's America Survivor's Warning, and it looks like this. Make sure you go check it out. Make sure you buy a bunch of them. It's a great book. Tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you came to America, what your story is. Just give a little bit of an introduction on that if you could.
Yes. And I was born in China. And I always say now I really make a point of it. I was born into the slavery of communism. I did not choose it. My parents and their generation chose it. So I was born in China. When I was about 7, the Cultural Revolution broke out. And that was 1966. The Cultural Revolution lasted for 10 years until Mao's death in 1976. So that 10 year was pretty much my whole schooling. And so by the time I graduated from high school in 1975, I was only 16.
Wow.
Because Mao cut off 2 years out of the 12-year school system, be saying that what's the use of have more education? We need to turn out the communist successor faster. So anyway, so I was sent to the countryside.
Okay.
to work in the fields to get my so-called re-education from the peasants. And the term re-education has made into the Chinese and into the American
Right.
language now.
Well,
So
yeah,
it's just,
Jordan Peterson just posted that he has to go into re-education indefinitely in Canada. So I don't know if you've seen that story. But real quick, so when did you? I know you talk about this in your book. Can you tell readers a little bit about Mao's Little Red Book and how that was part of the education? And did
yeah.
you get that before you went and started the re-education?
Okay, so when I was when the school started, I only have one semester of my first grade, which was considered kind of normal, even though it's indoctrination. But then the school stopped because the kids overthrow the school administration in every school in China. There's no school, just
The kids
stopped.
did it.
The kids did it because the kids had the permission and the encouragement from Mao to overthrow the authority. So I missed 2 years of schooling, and in some areas it lasted 4 years. So no school. So we just went to the street and just watched the Cultural Revolution unfold in front of our eyes. By the time we went back, all the old um, textbooks were banned because they were not good enough. They're not up to the political correctness of the day.
So
So for years,
not quality of content, just whether or not it's politically correct.
yeah, it was communist, but it's not communist enough, not
Okay.
to Mao's standard. Okay,
Yeah.
so for a whole year we have no textbook, but no worry, we have the Mao's Little Red Book, which was really a small book of Mao's quotations. And it's just a lot of them just out of context. This is quotations. So that's our textbook for everything. So we read it from beginning to the end and over again. Parts of it, the quotation were made into songs. So whenever the passage, there was a song for it, we sang. So
Yeah.
we sang, we read, we sang, we read, until later the new textbook came in. The new textbook, of course, is updated, more politically correct. Mao's Little Red Book
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
math, in reading, in Chinese, in English. I
Wow.
remember finally I get to learn English. I was so
Yeah.
excited. Do you know the first sentence we learned?
No.
Long live Chairman Mao. And so that's my education.
Yeah.
Until I graduated from high school, I learned hardly anything, and I still feel the effect. A lot of the Chinese words I can't pronounce it correctly or can write correctly because I had hardly any education,
Wow.
nothing but indoctrination.
So you said
So
your Chinese words that you struggled
yes,
still to
because that
pronounce because they
and
didn't
and
teach you how
then
to.
I learned
Wow.
the Chinese. There are a lot of characters and I just made a fool of myself not too long ago talking to an author and pronounced a word wrong.
Mm.
And I caught myself, but I
Yeah.
told him that my education was just really bad
Yeah.
because I did not have any real education. But anyway, so I worked in the countryside for 3 years
Yeah. And you were
until I was
16 at this point. 16 years old.
16.
Okay.
Yeah. And after Mao died, and finally Deng Xiaoping um, took over the power. And he was like a reformer. And he wanted to really turn things around and focus on improving. It just makes everything more normal. And he opened the university. So when at the age of 19, I was able to go to college,
Okay.
which I consider I was pretty fortunate. Some people stuck in the countryside for over 10 years. By the time they were too old for college and so missed the whole opportunity. So I was only 19, so I was lucky enough to go to college and study English. And after that, I worked about I think about 3 or 4 years, um, and then I got an opportunity to come to the
Yeah.
United States.
And
That
you
was
talk
1986.
and you talk about that in your book too, because you had to get your papers because
Oh,
you ran into a huge problem with that. Can you talk about that a little bit? About the fact that you had to basically you had one. I think it was one customs person or one, I can't remember the official title, but they basically said you're not leaving, and so you basically on a leap of faith go somewhere else, right?
This is so difficult a process, and that's why Americans need to know legal immigration was difficult. Most people have to go through years and waiting and getting all sorts of paper, getting all sorts of sponsorship from America in order to come here. That's my experience. But to
Mm-hmm.
me, I was rejected once by the visa officer,
Yeah.
and I have to go to another place um, to get. But I was fortunate to get it.
Yeah.
But it was a very difficult process. That's why when I got my visa, I feel like I win the lottery. And
Yeah.
it was a lottery for me because that changed my life. And now we just open our border, just whoever, criminals, everybody just walk in. Not just walk in. They
Right.
got cell phone, right?
Yeah.
And they got a hotel to
Yeah.
stay, and they got a voucher of $13,000 a month.
Wow. I didn't know it was
That's
that high.
just insane, you know.
Yeah.
And I want Americans to know we should never use the word immigration to describe the illegals. Call them illegal.
Mm-hmm.
They are illegal. We, people like us, are immigrants. This is illegal immigrants. Illegal and immigrants should not even be together.
Right. Right. Well, and they've tried to censor that too. You know, they've tried to control language so much, and they also, you know, you talk about the woke religion in your book a little bit, the DEI, all those things. What was, because you also ran into you've now run into a lot of the same communist ideas now in America. You talk about the visa and feeling like you've won the lottery, and then you come here and you're running up against it again. You know, where Americans, a lot of them will just stay silent in their work. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody who was a very devout Christian, you know, and really, you know, reads their Bible all the time or whatever, and now they're talking about unconscious bias training in their work, and they say, well, you know, I didn't like it at first, but I kind of see the point. But then, you know, I think of people like you who are taking a stand on this stuff. What's it been like for you to kind of be in a country like China, where you were born into it, and now coming here fighting it as hard as you are?
Yes, the thing is that this is the real problem, and I say that all the time, is the American people have no idea what communism is about. And because it's in their face, they can't recognize them.
Yeah.
Why they can't recognize what communism is? Because they're never taught. But why they're not taught about communism? Because it is by design. Older generation, you know, and they learned about communism. They learned about the evil of Soviet Union, and but the younger generation, they don't. Why? Because by then the educational system has been taken over by the Marxists. They don't want to teach. They
Right.
don't want to teach them real communism, how horrible it is, how deadly it is. That's the problem. So, in order to wake up American people, I think we should talk about history, talk about the real history, talk about what the real communism is. Okay, so I know. Why do I? How come I know? Because I heard those things before.
Yeah.
I heard those like for the to liberate people. Now, liberation now become a word, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Liberation, and that's what the CCP used to win over the population, including my parents. Both
Wow.
of them joined the revolution. Both of them actually from well-to-do families, not like they were the oppressed.
Yeah.
They joined the ranks
Yeah.
of the revolutionaries to help to liberate
Yeah.
the oppressed. All this language, all this terminology, it's like, what? It's here. Equity, all those is the language and the terminology I grew up with. I knew this is communism, but American people don't know. And because they never learned about it.
Right.
And so the same thing, you know, for the better of, you know, for the marginalized people, for the oppressed, and for equal outcome of this. This is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
communism.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that I was going to say too is what's been surprising to me is how many Christian universities and seminaries. I did a seminary degree in 2013 to 2017, and this stuff was just starting to come into the seminaries with the DEI and the rephrasing of things. And we were in Charlotte way before the Black Lives Matter riots became huge. We were like one of the first cities, and I still remember having a classmate who was on the Charlotte Police Department. He was in class, and he got a call. He had to go downtown because there were riots in the downtown, and we didn't really think anything of it. We kind of thought, well, it's, and then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. But I think the thing that was surprising to me was as I learned more of this stuff, that they were really capitalizing on these kind of Christian ideas and twisting them, like the idea of like Christian liberty, the idea of love, the idea of love your neighbor, good Samaritan kind of language and stuff, and really guilting people into it felt like these toxic ideas to where they think they're being, a good Christian by putting up a BLM sticker or, things like that. And it starts, like you said, the parallels, like you're saying, your family was from a well-to-do class, and like, a lot of my family, we weren't wealthy, but we would definitely be, well off. And a lot of people are, saying similar things in those circles. I had friends and family who put up the Black Lives Matter square because they just didn't know what it was. They didn't know that BLM had, destroy the nuclear family, on their website. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit, like how, because the other thing you mentioned was like Mao's Little Red Book. It makes me think, because we're Catholic, we recently converted actually, and so I've been able to see kind of like the stark contrast. And one of the things that's very interesting in reading communism is how much they hijack religious practices and like repetition. Like if you pray a rosary, for example, you're going to say the Hail Mary 50 times, or something like that. And they do a lot of the same things with repetition of these ideas or phrases. Just like keep repeating them to yourself as this it becomes a religious expression. What is it about communism that makes them try and hijack these ideas from religious groups and in order to bolster their ideology?
I think there is a parallel there, but there is a new development here. So, first of all, communism is against religion.
Right.
Why? Because communism is a religion itself.
Yep.
And for that reason, it cannot tolerate any other religion. And that's what Marx and Engels put it in the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
That they want to abolish religion. So that's what Mao did. Mao got rid of all the religions in China, such as Confucianism. It's kind of a semi-religion.
Yeah.
Okay. And Buddhism, Christianity, and Taoism, Islam, anything has to go in order to make way for the new religion, which is communism.
Yep.
But I think I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. I think the woke is a new, improved version of Marxism, of communism. And we have to think about the communism as the mirror image of Christianity. It's inverted.
Yes.
It looks so like in the mirror, but it's opposite.
Yeah.
And looks still familiar, look just like Christianity, but it's the opposite. Because Karl Marx, his father supposedly was a priest or was a pastor, converted from Judaism to Catholicism, right? Okay. So he was very familiar with Christianity. And he, if you want to come up with a new religion, you don't want to start something brand new and then get the new convert and what. No, you attach yourself to the most popular religion and just invert it and then just hijack it. That's exactly what communism is about. Just as you said, that's why there's so many people fall for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they use love, like love. Christian are supposed to love your neighbor,
Yep.
but this time it's not just your neighbor. You got to love whatever. You don't just love the sinners. You love the sin as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yep.
You
Yeah.
don't judge. You don't judge. Yeah. So whatever you just say, okay, I I uh, I support
Yeah.
because you want to be kind. Everything has been weaponized in Christianity. I think that is the real reason that there's so many people fall for it because Americans' kindness has been weaponized.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and my first experience with this was when we were investigating the Catholic faith. We were visiting some churches around here, and we happened to come at a time of Corpus Christi. And if you're not Catholic, that's when they take the host, or the monstrance, and they're, you've probably seen it on Twitter a little bit. They're walking through and doing this stuff. And this is totally new to me. And the day before, they had an LGBT parade, and on the same street. And I had seen these kinds of parades all the time, and it wasn't like San Francisco level stuff from what I understand. But when we walked through the streets the next day, I realized this is the counter reaction because it's peaceful, it's symbolic, and it actually represents what Christianity is all about, like going out into all the world. And the LGBT or the woke, or whatever you want to call it, when they go out in the streets, they're doing the same thing, but like you say, with a anti-gospel. It's like a virus. I guess the question I have right now is, why is it that they seek to infiltrate first? Why not just go right for it and try and shut it down? Why infiltrate religions at all?
As I said, if you want to take over something, you don't want to start new. It's much easier to attach yourself to something that's already been so popular and that's something so established. It's much easier to do it that way than start something new and find your new follower, find your new converts.
Yeah.
And it is so effective.
Yeah. Well,
You converted them and they don't even know they were converted.
that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. And do you think that this is at the individual's level? Like, obviously some of the higher ups, the people with power, do you think the individuals know this? Because sometimes I see this in, you'll see a pastor or something like that, or a seminarian, or even a congregant, cause a lot of ruckus in their churches or their schools. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they're doing it for the same motivations, or do you think that they think they're just well-intentioned,
No. It's a well designed, well implemented, and carried out. And you heard this saying, "Long march through institution."
Yep.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it means you take over slowly the institutions, little by little, mostly under the radar of most people.
Yeah.
And you take them over. So a lot of people don't even know. And so we now see how successful they are. They've been taking over all our institutions,
Yeah.
including educational institutions. Started with academia.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Then
here's
I want to say, what I want to say is including seminaries. Absolutely. And when you want to change a generation, you start with education. And they did start with higher education, including seminaries and all that. Now it's in kindergarten.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and your comment about the seminaries makes me think of a priest named Father Walter Chiswick. And he went to do missions work in Russia, and he got caught. And they basically told him, you need to become a spy and go back to the Vatican. And like the level at which they wanted to infiltrate schools and things like that is all talked about in there. And I think that in America, that the seminaries and stuff are largely Protestant. 80% of Americans are Protestant. And the seminaries, there's lots of them, and they're big. But I think that I definitely underestimated how much the seminaries were going to become part of, the strategy to implement some of this stuff. And I don't know if you've been following Megan Basham at all, but she just released a book called Shepherds for Sale, in which she talks about some of the ways that this. I plan to read the book myself, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But if you go follow, I'll send you her link, but you can go check her out. But she's talked a lot about the infiltration specifically of the SBC and other evangelical organizations, which I think is really important. The last comment I had on this before we move on to another topic is, it's interesting that you say that communism is a religion, because in Christianity, one of the questions is like, well, what is, man ultimately? Is he just a thinking thing? Is he just an animal? And, the church actually describes man as primarily a religious creature. And so it's interesting that you describe, especially with your experience of communism and also now woke revolutions in the United States, that you see them targeting the same heart of man basically as a religious creature and trying to put that religion in the state. And I just wanted to highlight, I think your thoughts on that are really good. One thing I wanted to ask you is, so why is it that they seem to destroy imagery? Like, one of the things you talked about that I thought was interesting is the way that, you come over to the United States and you struggled to get a job, if I recall correctly, and you start to kind of think that maybe Mao was right. But one of the things you said was that going to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I recall from your book is you started going to like historical sites where you saw, American heroes, basically statues of them. And can you elaborate on what that experience did for you and how it kind of was an antidote to the virus of communism in your mind?
Yeah, that was a long process, and I did say in my book that even though I left China, even though I hate communism, but it took me a long time to detox and all the things that put in my mind, all the just absolutely toxic ideology. And for the longest time, I really thought our rights were from the government. I mean, I tell you, probably just 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, of course. The government make laws and they allow us to do this and that, even though I know, Declaration of
Right.
Independence. And I never really give it a deep thought
Yeah.
and what it means. And so by visiting, or I live in Virginia. I love Virginia because it is a place that the revolution
Yeah.
started with the home of our founding fathers,
Right.
Washington, Jefferson, Madison. It's just amazing. I visit their homes, and I started this journey of reading about Americans' founding. What makes this country great? Why we have freedom? I mean, this is a journey that I really it took me a while to really understand how different it is from communism. Communism, absolutely, the state determine what you can do, what you cannot do, what you can think, what you can read, who you can marry, how many children you can have, where do you live. They absolutely own you. It's slavery.
Yeah.
It is a slavery. In America, our rights are not from the government. It's from our creator.
Yeah.
And no one can take away. That is so fundamental.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't think about it. Not too long ago, I don't know whether you know this. There was a reporter on CNN complaining those right extremists think that their rights is from God.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
I saw
it's
that.
from Jesus. Oh my God! When I saw that, I said, "This is where we are today."
Yeah.
The Americans do not understand, and how special a gift that we have by living here.
Yeah.
That our rights are from our Creator, and the government's sole job is protect our rights.
Right. On another level, talk about what Americans can do if they start to see these ideas. Because, I see this coming into my circles a lot of times where people will say something and you're like, well, that's the the communism, right? But they don't know it as communism. So what would you say, how have you dealt with that, in your own life, and how would you advise Americans or Christians to do it in theirs?
I always say the only way to wake people up is to teach them real history. And so because the Americans have no reference point, they when the 2020 happened, this what was going on, and overnight they were called, the white people were called people with privilege,
Yeah.
and that you're oppressor. And they just have no idea where it's coming from. Of course they don't know, because they don't know history,
Right.
and so they don't have a reference point. So I think when people understand this is nothing new, this happened before, it happened in China, in
That's all
other
right.
communist countries, and they were saying this is the same I'm sorry,
That's
this is
okay.
the same BS.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then you know how to fight back. But unless they know, we can't fight back effectively. You can't fight back an enemy that you don't even understand. And this is not just, I'm not just talking about people who have been brainwashed.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a lot of people who consider them conservatives,
Yes.
but they don't understand. We're no longer fighting against a Democrat that can kind of go kind of a nuts.
Yeah.
No, we're really, really fighting against communism.
And that's the question I have for you is like, if people are just closing their ears to this stuff, do you just move on? Or do you think that it's important to continue to engage?
I really I don't want to sound like I'm promoting something kind of radical, but we are dealing with something radical. We are dealing with communism.
Yeah.
Communism is this radical ideology, and it's not about, this is important to know, it's not about equity, it's not about diversity, it's not about the poor, it is really about power. But they use those tactics
Mm-hmm.
to get people's support, but they really, really is after one thing, that's power, and it's by any means necessary. And it's not surprising for a lot of conservatives that they will go as far as physically taking out their political opponent.
Yeah.
And then what happened, I don't think, were you shocked? we were I was shocked, but I was not,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I understand. So that is the kind of enemy we are facing. They will do whatever to maintain
Yeah.
power.
Well, and that gets to the point of X too. Just as an aside, one of the day that shooting happened, X proved its value above all news sites. I don't care if you love, that particular conservative group over here, or, these groups over here. It really showed that your access to information now is completely and totally unfiltered. Like, you can get at real-time
Yes.
information. I mean, even some of my most favorite news sites, like I love the Daily Wire, they were 20 minutes behind. This isn't a knock on them. It's just the nature of the updates, They were 20 minutes behind what was actually being reported on X. And, that really showed the power of it, which I don't know if you want to get into it or not. So if you want to just bypass this topic. But did you see that they had to close the offices in Brazil for
Yeah.
X? Did you see that before we started the interview? That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is, what is the difference between global communism versus like a localized kind of national communism? Because it really feels like this is coming from outside the United States and from within. It feels like we're kind of getting pinched from both sides.
Yes.
Can you speak to that a little
Well,
bit?
yeah. I think this is a global phenomenon. It's the communist or Marxist, whatever you call it. It's the same thing to me. It's interchangeable. This is really a globalist in want to take over the world. Okay, the globalists are the communists, are the Marxists. Yeah, yes, they are. Yes, or no, they are not. When I say they are, is they are using all the tactics from the Marxist communist playbook. Why do they do that? Because it's effective.
Right.
It has been proven effective. So, do they believe in those equity or whatever? No,
Right.
no one does. Mao did not, Stalin did not, Lenin did not, Castro did not. But if you want to get to power, Marxism and communism prove to be the most effective way because you have this deception and you are doing things for the poor, for the marginalized, whatever. So it's global.
Yeah.
And where's the center? Here in America.
Yeah.
I think that America become the number one exporter of woke ideologies.
Yeah. Well, and
And
keep going.
yeah, yeah, they are from where?
Yeah.
From elite universities.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, it's
They are
also
from, yeah,
yeah, it's also from the UN too. Like one of the things that was shocking to me is if you go to the UN and you go to their website during the month of June, you will see a ton of woke stuff coming from all over their website about LGBT Pride Month,
yeah,
transgender
yeah.
stuff, all those things.
But but they're not the leader. The leaders were in United States. I went to UK in May, and I talked to. They said whatever happened in America will take a few days, and they will get there. Like pro Hamas,
Yeah.
BMM, take a few days, and we'll eventually get there. So I think and it's America become the center of Western Marxism, communism.
They're the
But it's
megaphone, basically, is what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then they spread all. But do you notice the woke thing did not happen in China? It's not going on in North Korea. It's
Right.
not in Russia.
Right.
You think about it. Do you know why? Yeah, this is what I say. Um, the reason we have the woke revolution. Yeah, it's a revolution, really.
Yeah.
In the Western world, when I say Western world, I'm talking about not just America
Right.
and not just Europe, but including like Japan and a part of South or Latin America. Um, it's all happening in all those places. Why? And what does it do? It create division. It create chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It create really revolution, and it really is a way to destabilize a society. And when do you want to destabilize a society? When you want to seize power.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so woke is a way for the elite to seize power. And why it's not happening in China? Xi Jinping has power. Xi Jinping would not allow any of those crazy woke ideology come to China to create this division. No, no, no. He has control, and he want maintain his control of power. He would not allow those things. So here and so is Russia, so is North Korea. So here is my message: the wokesters, those LGBTQ, those marginalized, uh, it's called a BIPOC,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Black, indigenous, people of color, all those people,
Yep.
they think they are carrying the revolution for freedom. Well, look at China, look at Russia, and look at North Korea. When the globalists have total control of power, they're not going to put up with all these riots, with all this protests, with all this looting.
Mm-hmm.
No, you all go to where? Gulags.
Yes. Yeah.
That
And
is my message. You are useful idiots because they need you to create chaos, to create this look like a revolution.
yeah.
No, no, it's not for you. It's for them to seize power. Once they have power, all of troublemakers become the problem, and they will get rid of them faster than they think than they expected, because that's what happened to the Red Guards. The Red Guards did exactly what Mao wanted them to do: destroyed everything, pull everything out of power, for Mao, and they finished the job in 2 years. Guess what happened to them? They become a problem
Yeah.
because the usefulness was no longer there. So
Yeah.
Mao got rid of them. Mao sent them to the countryside to get the so-called re-education. A lot of them were sent to the remote virgin land to open up farmland. And
Wow.
a lot of them just really, some of them just never came back, or when they came back, they were too old to go to college. They were just like, they were called the lost generation.
Wow.
And that's what's going to wait for those activists,
Yeah.
those, now they call themselves revolutionaries.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen to them.
Yeah. So as far as Christians go, what would you say are ways that Christians can start to stand up for freedom, especially freedom of religion? What would you say are some of the ways they can do that as individuals?
I think as individuals, you really have to pay attention what your minister or pastor, what your church is teaching. And now I follow a few on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
They are absolutely woke Christian. So they are not Christian. They are communists. And so I think you can't just be passively just be a Christian. You have to really take control and say, and then really see, is your church teaching the gospel or teaching woke ideologies? And and if you find that they're not teaching Christianity, then you need to confront them or just leave.
Yeah.
And I think that, do you know that Charlie Kirk said that 75 or more of church has been infiltrated and gone woke?
Yeah. I
There's
believe it.
only, like, in my area, there's one church that's really doing well, and he is never shying from talking about politics,
Yep.
because you have to talk about politics. You can't say, "Oh, we're just talking about Bible. We don't care about what's going on in the real world." Yes, we have to,
Yeah.
because the real world want to destroy the church.
Right. Yeah. And where our church is at is we saw that the churches that are not afraid to speak out, they're the ones who have the families. Like
Mhm.
like those are the ones with, it was so weird because when I was Protestant, I went in, and I'm not trying to get into the Protestant Catholic thing, but this is an interesting cultural observation. When you go into the Protestant churches, if it's a young mega church kind of situation, usually they're the ones who are kind of getting sucked into some of this stuff. Like they're there for emotional highs or whatever. But if you go to a Catholic church or an Anglican church or a liturgical church where, there's what they would say smells and bells are more the norm. If it's an older church, it's most likely woke. And I think that,
You mean the older the
yeah,
church, the more likely?
yeah,
Can I say something here?
yeah, sure, go for it.
I think this is the proof of the success of uh, long march through institutions. Look at the Vatican.
Yeah,
Look at the Pope.
yeah,
They go after the bigger the institution, the more they work on it to infiltrate it. Because once they infiltrate the top,
hmm,
they take over the whole institution. And it's the same thing with school board. And they go after the big one.
yeah,
And if there is here's another thing. If everything is concentrated, and it's easier for them to take over.
yeah,
And that's why they want to build everything. They want to give the federal government more power, because once the federal government has power, they can take over the whole country. But if we have the power separation, we have a local power, it's much harder for them to
hmm,
do that. And
right,
I believe that, and that is the key, that we don't want them to, we should pay attention, and we don't want them to have more power to take over the institution.
yeah. Do you think, with the globalist kind of mechanism, like what's going on in the UK? I'm sure you've seen that with some of the
Mhm.
like people posting social media posts and getting in trouble. What do you think that Christians today can, especially if they're in a place like the UK or in the United States specifically, do you think that we can turn the tide without having to suffer for our beliefs?
Um, this is what I think. And this is not what I think. This is the fact that the Western civilization was built on Christianity, period.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And that's why in the Western world, we have eventually we developed democracy and we developed country like the United States. That is absolutely because of Christianity. And so how do we defeat communism? How do we defeat wokeism? There's only one thing we can use to defeat it. It's Christianity. So before we can restore the church and really help the Christians to understand that the wokeness is an inverted version of Christianity, I think we are not going to defeat communism.
Gotcha.
I don't know whether I expressed it clearly.
No, I
I
think
think
you did.
the only weapon to defeat communism is Christianity.
Yeah. There's a quote that I have on my wall, and I always butcher it, but it says, civilizations are built by people who know that they will never sit under the shade of trees that they planted, you know? And I think a big part of, at least from what my vantage point, is that we've gotten so comfortable that we're no longer concerned about the next generation of Americans or wherever you are. You know, we don't care about whether or not a kid can go to church and not be afraid of, what he posted online becoming, a means for him to go to jail. And I think I've had people tell me when I talk about like the birth rate or things like that in America, like going down, I've had Christians tell me, well, that's good. That means Jesus is going to come back sooner. And I think that perspective is a real dangerous one because it keeps people from taking a stand. If they think that the worse things get, the more likely things are going to turn in their favor and they don't have to say anything, I think that's how you get some of these bad ideas, which I think you highlighted really well. And yeah.
Okay, so I think we talk about this and that, but really we're fighting for our freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're fighting about where the freedom came from.
Right.
And the freedom is not, you cannot find this idea of liberty and freedom in any of the Chinese so-called religion. You can't find it in Confucianism. You cannot find it in Taoism. It's another Chinese religion. You cannot find it in Buddhism. You cannot find it in Islam. You cannot find it in any other religion. This is unique of Christianity. The idea of liberty, of individual liberty, and that our rights from our Creator is uniquely Christian, and that is why if we don't fight back the woke ideology, we're going to lose our freedom. And the only way to fight back is Christianity. I hope this probably will make more sense to people.
Yeah. Well,
That how special it is. How special this idea that we take it for granted.
Yeah.
We take for granted that we always have freedom. No.
Well, right. And if Christians, because if Christianity is the antidote, if Christians do not start to really speak up, and I think sometimes people don't define what that is, but I think it can be little things too, like don't go to the unconscious bias training, or, don't say, at least recognize that it's not good.
Yeah.
Start at least with acknowledging, like, maybe you have to go, maybe you don't have the courage to take a stand at your job. Maybe it's a real bad idea for you to take a stand at your job because you could do more good with keeping your job and supporting people like she. But I also think that, that's a plug for her book, by the way. Go buy her book. So, but I think the thing is that what I see is that there's a lot of Christians who are afraid of what's going on. And there's a friend of mine, and I talk about this all the time. In the book of Revelation, when the judgment of the world comes, the first people that are thrown into the lake of fire are not unbelievers, they're cowards. And, I think that is a really important thing to keep in mind during the times that we're in, because as you say, Christianity, and I agree with you, is the antidote. But if Christians decide to keep their light hidden, our freedoms are going to die in darkness, as a newspaper, I think, once used to believe. I think that was the New York
And
Times.
also I want to say that just think about it. Like, let's say 50 years ago. 50 years ago, if you say something that is not quite political correct,
Yeah,
you maybe called a few bad names,
right.
and you make it less popular. And how fast? Just at about 10 years. Now, if you say the same thing, you may lose your jobs,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
you may lose your livelihood. Your shops or stores or business may be attacked,
right.
and you may be arrested. So if you keep quiet, do you know what's happened next? And that happened in China. That happened in all communist countries. Next, this is happening in America already. You'll be imprisoned.
Yeah,
Then the next, you'll be executed. And so if you keep quiet, you think, oh, maybe they will stop. They will not stop. They
right.
will not stop. It will get worse and worse and worse. And that's what happening in all communist countries. So we should have spoken up decade ago. We
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah,
That's why we're here today. So you still don't speak up,
yeah.
I just warned you what's going to happen next.
Yeah, well, you definitely know from experience what that looks like. So make sure you guys check out her book, She Van Fleet. It is a really good book. It really outlines everything that we've been talking about right here. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And I hope that we can do this again if you're okay with it. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right.